Welcome to the Formula Bone F1 Show's 2022 Singapore Grand Prix preview. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. Let's get into it, folks. J-Bone! Our first order of business today is getting to know the Singapore Grand Prix and its circuit, the Marina Bay Street Circuit. The Singapore Grand Prix was first run as a Formula One World Championship event back in 2008 and was held every year from 2008 through 2019 before taking 2 years off due to global health concerns. Formula One has quite obviously grown in popularity a lot since 2019, so that means that this will be many Formula One fans' first time watching a Singapore Grand Prix live, including mine, and I'm very, very excited for it. Singapore is an island nation consisting of 63 different islands that sit just off the coast of Malaysia in Southeast Asia. And the Singapore Grand Prix is one of just 4 Formula One Grand Prix that take place within an island country. The other 3 are the Bahrain Grand Prix, British Grand Prix, and Japanese Grand Prix. However, there are a couple more races that aren't technically Island Grand Prix that you could definitely consider Island Grand Prix. The Australian Grand Prix is technically not an Island Grand Prix because Australia is a continent, and by definition, continents can't be islands. But I still kind of think of Australia as an island, so I kind of consider that one an Island Grand Prix. And then, while Canada is obviously not an island country, the Canadian Grand Prix itself does take place on the artificial Notre Dame Island located in the St. Lawrence River outside Montreal. So it's actually the most Island Grand Prix of all the Island Grand Prix, despite not actually being an Island Grand Prix because it doesn't take place within an island country. While 2008 marked the beginning of the Formula One Singapore Grand Prix era, the race itself actually existed from 1966 to 1973, not as a Formula One event, but as a Formula Libre event. Formula Libre is a very spectacular racing variation where a bunch of different types of race cars are allowed to compete against each other. So you'd have commercially available sports cars, racing Formula One cars, racing Formula 2 cars, all in the same field doing battle. Now, the Formula Libre Singapore Grand Prix played host to some crazy storylines. You have the circuit that it was raced on, the Thomson Road Grand Prix circuit, being way, way too dangerous. At one point on the racetrack, cars could go airborne, and there was also a section of the circuit named Murder Mile. It's not a good name if you're, trying not to die. 7 people died by way of racing accidents in just 11 years at the Thomson Road Grand Prix circuit because of the street circuit's treacherous nature. Here's a quote about the circuit from Autosport editor Richard Feast. Quote, "The circuit over which the Grand Prix is run would send shivers down the collective spines of the CSI Safety Committee. To obtain the circuit, the public roads are simply closed off. If there are any safety devices, I didn't see any." End quote. Motor racing was banned in Singapore after the 1973 Formula Libre Singapore Grand Prix due to a number of reasons, including the obvious safety issues, rising gas prices, and the inconvenience of shutting down many of Singapore's limited amount of city streets so rich guys could get into car crashes. And the Singapore Grand Prix did not run again after 1973 until the Formula One Singapore Grand Prix premiered in 2008. Speaking of the Formula One Singapore Grand Prix, here are 3 Singapore Grand Prix fun facts. Fact 1, the inaugural Formula One Singapore Grand Prix, which took place in 2008, was the first night race in F1 history. This night race was such a hit that it inspired many future night races. The 2023 season will actually feature 6 night races, which means a quarter of all Formula One races next year will be under the lights. Fact 2, for the first 5 years of its existence, the Marina Bay Street Circuit contained the Singapore Sling. No, I'm not referring to the adult beverage known by the same name. I'm referring to the old Turn 10 chicane. Now, this chicane contained a super narrow, super sudden left, right, left series with massive curbs on either side that would launch your car into the air if you got off the racing line. It wasn't really dangerous as it was a relatively low-speed chicane, but it was very race-ruining, with the Singapore sling causing a number of retirements because cars would go airborne, and by the time they land, they can't right themselves before they slammed into the wall. It's a street circuit, very narrow. And fact 3, the F1 Singapore Grand Prix has been held 12 times, but has only featured 4 different race winners, 3 of whom will be competing in this year's race. You have 2-time winner Fernando Alonso, shout out Crashgate, 4-time winner Lewis Hamilton, and 5-time winner Sebastian Vettel. Now, interestingly, all 3 of them have won in Singapore on 2 different teams. That's pretty wild. And if you were wondering, that 4th racer who will not be competing unless pigs start flying between now and the race is 1-time winner Nico Rosberg. Let's move on to discussing the circuit itself. The Marina Bay Street Circuit, located across downtown Core and Kallang, Singapore, is 5.063 kilometers or 3.146 miles in length. And the Singapore Grand Prix will be contested over the course of 61 laps around its 23 turns. Marina Bay Street Circuit is said to be the most physically and mentally demanding circuit for drivers on the entire F1 calendar. First off, there's the fact that it has 23 turns. While the Marina Bay Street Circuit doesn't have the most turns on the F1 calendar, that title goes to the Jeddah Corniche Circuit in Saudi Arabia, which has 27, it is arguably the windiest circuit on the F1 calendar, as its 23 corners are the second most on the F1 calendar behind Jeddah Corniche, and these corners that it has are much more cornery than Jeddah Corniche's mostly slight corners, meaning drivers will be experiencing an insane amount of G-forces during this race. Not only that, but Marina Bay Street Circuit doesn't feature very long straights, meaning drivers will not have much time to rest between these G-force beatings. Second, Marina Bay Street Circuit is very narrow. Mental exhaustion is always extremely high for drivers while racing in Singapore, as the drivers have to focus extra hard on not exceeding track limits the entire race at a circuit where doing so will almost certainly ruin or even end your race. I should note here, the Singapore Grand Prix has featured at least one safety car every year since 2008, with 21 total safety car deployments in those 12 races. So I think it's safe to say we should be seeing at least one safety car this weekend. Then, on top of all of that I just said, you have Singapore's notorious heat and high humidity that combine with poor ventilation from drivers' fire suits, the heat from the car, and a longer than normal race duration due to the amount of corners to just absolutely drain the energy from drivers the whole race. The drivers after this race will be more physically and mentally exhausted than after any other race on the F1 calendar. The cool-down room is going to need to do its job because we don't want anybody passing out on the podium, okay? This episode is sponsored by Birddogs, and for being a Formula Bone F1 show viewer and or listener, you will get a free incredible gift with your order of the best shorts, pants, and joggers on planet Earth with my code FBONE on birddogs.com. I'm wearing a Birddogs shirt. I'm wearing a Birddogs joggers right now. I freaking love Birddogs, folks. I've been wearing my Birddogs shorts all summer long because you can do anything in them. Wear them while watching Formula One, working out, playing sports, sleeping, getting into a heated F1 Twitter debate, and even swimming. Birddog shorts are the absolute best because they are so comfortable and because you can get them with built-in underwear that feels better on your skin than the finest silk sheets and cashmere, and is also super breathable, does not bunch up like traditional underwear, is quick drying, and cuts down on laundry. That last bit is my favorite part. As far as the free gift goes, it could be any number of crazy gizmos and gadgets, such as a rope hat. I love rope hats. Pretty sure the gift right now is a rope hat, folks, so get it while you can. There's a rope hat, a dad hat, a tumbler, a pair of nunchucks, whistling football, and much more. It always changes, so you can always go to birddogs.com, plug in FBONE, and see what there is for you. So go to birddogs.com right now, enter promo code FBONE, FBONE, and they'll throw in that free gift with your order. You will not want to ever take your bird dogs off. I promise you this. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. For tire compounds at the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix, Pirelli have opted for the softest compound range, the C3 hards, C4 mediums, and C5 softs. Pirelli Motorsport Director Mario Isola had this to say about their selection. Quote, "With completely different tires to last time in Singapore, it's almost like a totally new race. We've missed the spectacular night action of Singapore's streets. With 18-inch tires that have a completely different compound and structure compared to the ones used 3 years ago, as well as new asphalt this year, it's almost like a totally new race. Singapore is all about slow corners, all 23 of them, and maximizing traction. We've got the 3 softest compounds for maximum speed and grip, but looking after the rear tires in order to ensure the drive needed will be key. With the tendency of the latest cars to understeer, it will be even more important to find the right setup balance to ensure a strong front end without compromising acceleration at the rear." End quote. Next up, here are your storylines to follow for the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix. The first storyline: will Max Verstappen win the Singapore Grand Prix and increase his current Grand Prix winning streak to 6 and win the World Drivers' Championship? If Max Verstappen wins the Singapore Grand Prix, he will join the German duo of Sebastian Vettel and Michael Schumacher in the club of drivers who have won 6+ consecutive races in a single Formula One season. Now, as far as Max clinching the World Drivers' Championship in Singapore is concerned, here's a refresher on what needs to happen if Max wants to win the World Drivers' Championship in Singapore. First up, Max must win the Singapore Grand Prix, which must award full points to drivers by being run to at least 75% of the total race distance. Then, if Max does get the fastest lap point, Charles Leclerc must finish P8 or lower, and Checo Perez must finish P4 or lower. Or, if Max doesn't get the fastest lap point along with his win, Charles Leclerc must finish P9 or lower, and Checo Perez must finish P4 or lower unless he is the one who gets the fastest lap point, in which case he must finish P5 or lower for Max to win the championship in Singapore. Now, I've got a conspiracy theory about Max Verstappen, okay? I have a conspiracy theory that Max Verstappen's going to win the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix and that this win has already been decided. Okay? Stay with me here. The last 2 Singapore Grand Prix before the Singapore Grand Prix became a Formula One event were in 1972 and 1973. The winner of the 1972 Singapore Grand Prix's name? Max Stewart. The winner of the 1973 Singapore Grand Prix's name? Vern Schuppan. Combine those 2 names, and what do you get? Max Verstappen, which sounds suspiciously close to Max Verstappen. I'm just saying. The second storyline: how will Singapore's weather affect the race weekend? As it stands, here's the race weekend weather forecast. Friday, partly cloudy, high of 87 degrees Fahrenheit, 31 degrees Celsius, 20% chance of rain, 72% humidity, okay? So Friday's not looking too bad, but then get a load of these, folks. Saturday, scattered thunderstorms, high of 86 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius, 70% chance of rain, 74% humidity. And Sunday, thunderstorm, high of 84 degrees Fahrenheit, 29 degrees Celsius, 70% chance of rain again, and 75% humidity. So yeah, if things stay forecasted similar to this, it is safe to say that Singapore's weather could very much affect the race to a very high degree by causing some wet weather insanity. This could get chaotic, folks. We saw earlier this year in Monaco what a wet street race can look like. and that was a pretty freaking wild race. So this one could get crazy. Buckle up, folks. The final storyline, hear me out. Do Haas actually have a shot at winning the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix? Now, this may just be my Haas delusion syndrome talking, but I'm not entirely sure because I've got some solid evidence, okay? Kevin Magnussen is an absolute Singapore Grand Prix legend. He literally has the lap record at the Marina Bay Street Circuit, which he set in 2018, and he also has both the 2018 and 2019 Singapore Grand Prix Fastest Lap Awards to his name. Now, keen observers of the Formula Bone F1 show may notice that, I said Fastest Lap Awards and not Fastest Lap Points, and that's because both times he set the fastest lap in Singapore, Kevin Magnussen didn't finish higher than P17. But still, if he's capable of getting fastest laps, who knows what else K-Mag is capable of? Plus, with the weather forecast, who knows what could happen in Singapore this weekend, folks? You don't know. I don't know. No Haas delusion syndrome. Just vibes. Huge, massive news, folks. Massive news. No, I'm not talking about Latifi leaving Formula One after this season or the fact that there will somehow be 6 sprint events next season. I'm talking about how I just did a massive merch drop filled with custom designs straight from the brain of J-Bone that I think you're going to love and that ship globally, okay? I ship globally. Let me quickly run you through Formula Bone merch drop round 1. First, there's probably my favorite design of the whole bunch, Danka Seb, the unofficial shirt of saying bye to Inspector Seb, because we're all going to miss this legendary 4-time world champion and professional scooterer. Next up, there's the long-awaited DRS chicken design. Remember those Max vs. Charles DRS detection line games of chicken we saw at the beginning of the season? I know, that feels like forever ago. Well, for some reason, I decided to imagine what a DRS chicken would look like if it were a fried chicken restaurant, and the rest is, of course, history. And lastly, folks, self-loathing fans of a certain American Formula One team, this design is for you. Meet Pain F1 Team, the most disappointing yet oddly hope-inspiring F1 team ever created. And of course, I also have a few pieces of Formula Bone themed merch in the shop as well. I currently offer global shipping to over 50 countries and territories. And if your country isn't currently eligible for shipping, shoot me a DM and I will work it out. When you buy Formula Bone merch, you are directly supporting Formula Bone financially and making it so that I can keep making Formula One content. So I really, really appreciate the support. J-Bone! Next up, here are my eagerly anticipated 3 Bone-afide race predictions for the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix that I'm about to go 3 for 3 on. Bone-afide prediction number 1, Max Verstappen will win the Singapore Grand Prix but not be crowned World Drivers' Champion. I do think the Marina Bay Street Circuit suits the Ferrari car better, but anyone who bets against Max Verstappen right now after he's won 5 straight races is a lunatic. That being said, I do not think Max will clinch the 2022 World Drivers' Championship title in Singapore, as I think Leclerc will finish high enough to prevent that from happening. And, of course, now that I've said that, he'll probably DNF and Max will clinch the title, so sorry for the potential jinx, Ferrari fans. My bad. Bone-afide prediction number 2. The podium at the Singapore Grand Prix will feature 1 Ferrari, 1 Red Bull, and 1 Mercedes. Of this season's 16 races, there have been 6 podiums where 3 different constructors were represented. Of those 6 podiums, they all featured 1 Ferrari, 1 Red Bull, and 1 Mercedes, and 2 of them were the podiums at the 2 most recent races, the Italian Grand Prix and the Dutch Grand Prix. And I think that we make it 3 in a row in Singapore, as I think that this is a very equalizing circuit where success will be determined more by drivers than by cars. For reference, last season featured 9 podiums where 3 different constructors were represented, and interestingly, of those 9 podiums, only 2 featured 1 Ferrari, 1 Red Bull, and 1 Mercedes. There was the Russian Grand Prix, which should have featured a McLaren. I still cry when I think about that race for Lando. And there's the infamous Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which, just kidding, we're not going to go there. And Bone-afide prediction number 3, at least 1 Haas car will finish in the points at the Singapore Grand Prix. I promise this is not my Haas delusion syndrome talking. I actually, truly believe this. K-Mag is a Singapore Grand Prix superstar, with him having the lap record there. Plus, Haas are just due. They have not scored a single point in the past 5 races, and everyone knows you cannot keep the Steiner ship in port for too long, okay? Let's go, Haas. Those were J-Bone's Bone-afide race predictions. Now I want to hear your Bone-afide race predictions. Let me see them in the YouTube comment section of this episode. Speaking of YouTube, I'm trying to get 1,500 likes on this video episode. If you can do J-Bone a solid and toss this video a like. J-Bone! Next up, folks, I'm going to now give my Bone-afide pre-race weekend predictions for the top 5 finishers in Sunday's Singapore Grand Prix with, as always, zero reasoning nor explanation. P5, George Russell. P4, Carlos Sainz. P3, Lewis Hamilton. P2, Charles Leclerc. And P1, Max Verstappen, aka Max Verstappen. And finally, if you are a video editor who's good at Adobe Premiere Pro, I am currently looking for part-time remote video interns to help me continue to pump out as many Formula Bone social media clips as I possibly can. This would be a paid internship after a short trial period, so if you are a video editor who loves F1 and wants to help me grow Formula Bone, shoot an email to jared@bolenmedia.com. That's jared@bolenmedia.com with subject line Formula Bone Intern, and also in your email, include a paragraph about you and your qualifications. I look forward to adding some more interns to the team. J-Bone! Folks, that does it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you enjoyed the show and want to help me out, I would really appreciate it if you could buy a piece of Formula Bone merch if you're able to. It's available now on bolenmedia.com/shop. There's a link to the Formula Bone shop in the description of this episode. For Formula One updates between now and my Singapore Grand Prix recap episode, you can join over 700 members of the Bone Brigade in the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link that I've placed in the description of this episode. You can also follow me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JaredBorislow. Until next time, folks, J-Bone!